So come to order. Who seeks recognition?
Here.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I yield to the gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, for a unanimous consent request.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in strong opposition to the Farm Bill rule and the underlying bill because it will increase hunger in America.
Objection. There is objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to my good friend, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Kennedy, for a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in strong opposition to the Farm Bill rule and the underlying bill because it takes food nutrition away from working families. Thank you.
Is there objection? There is objection. The gentleman from Massachusetts will state his point of parliamentary.
Am I understanding the gentleman's objection correctly, that what he is doing is not even giving members on our side the courtesy of inserting their statement in the record?
Will state a proper point of parliamentary inquiry.
I'm trying to understand what the objection means, that the gentleman from Texas, I mean, does that mean that the gentleman from Massachusetts' statement that he just made will not appear in the record?
The objection was to the unanimous consent request. The gentleman has not stated a point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, at this point I'd like to yield to the gentlelady from New York, my good friend Ms. Lowy, for a unanimous consent request.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in strong opposition to the Farm Bill rule and the underlying bill because it hurts the working poor and takes food and nutrition from hard-working families.
There's objection.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield to the gentlelady from Nevada, Ms. Titus, for a unanimous consent request.
The gentlelady from Nevada is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in strong opposition to the Farm Bill rule and the underlying bill because it takes the safety net away from America and Nevada's poor families.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield to the gentlelady from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for a unanimous consent request.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in strong opposition to the Farm Bill and the underlying rule because it increases hunger and poverty in America.
Is there objection? There is objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 15 seconds.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 15 seconds.
Yeah, I think it is extremely unfortunate that members on the other side of the aisle would deny members on this side of the aisle the ability to insert written materials in the record. In all my years here, I've never seen such
will the gentleman yield?
Gesture.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will not yield to the gentleman.
The gentleman does not yield. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we reserve our time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts controls the time.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm proud to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it's no secret that the Republican Tea Party has a national agenda that's playing out right here in this chamber today. You are attempting to defund food stamps, yes you are, and place poor people, which includes children and the elderly and veterans, in a position that none of you would want to be in. When it was time to reauthorize the Farm Bill, Republicans cut $16 billion in food stamps. And what happened? The Speaker refused to schedule the bill for floor action, not because the cuts were too deep, but because they were not deep enough. And so the Ag Committee made deeper cuts, this time $20 billion in cuts. When the bill was debated, Republicans then offered mean-spirited amendments that doomed the bill. Now you bring us another bill with no nutrition title at all. We cannot stand by and be silent when Republicans take these actions that offend what we are as Americans. We can do better than this. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair, not directly to other members of the body. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. The gentleman from Texas continues to reserve.
Continue reserve.
The gentleman from Texas continues reserved. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer.
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the relentless focus on the nutrition programs at risk. But remember, this is going to be the costliest farm bill in history. It contains no reform. It concentrates federal cash on the largest, most profitable agribusiness. It shortchanges conservation, guts protections for wetlands, prairies, and forests. It rewards government dependency, not innovation. You have managed to unite the Environmental Working Group, the Farm Bureau, and the Club for Growth in opposition. Congratulations. Please reject the rule and the underlying bill.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I believe it's important for us to understand what's in the bill, and I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Oklahoma, the chairman of the Agriculture Committee.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have preferred to focus my time in the general debate, and that's still my intention. The rules debate, historically, as we all know in this body, is more of a partisan discussion, generally less focused on the details of the bill than the intensity of the process or the perspective by which the next action takes place. I understand that. But I would say to my friends, and I'll go into greater detail into this in just a little bit, remember, what you are about to vote on a rule to enable us to proceed to a vote entails is consideration of a bill that took 2 markups over 2 years in committee, where 100 amendments were considered in both markups, a process by which a bill came to the floor a couple of weeks ago subject to another 100 amendments, tremendous debate, tremendous discussion, but yet a bill that could not quite get the muster of both the left and the right. So we wound up a little short in the middle. What you're voting on today is the Farm Bill. It's what a lot of the folks back home have said for years they want. Consider every issue on its own merit. Well, now we're about to vote for a rule that will make that possible. But in the Farm Bill, we achieve savings in the commodity title. Do away with the direct payments. That thing that's caused such great angst. People getting money for not doing anything. That's gone. A substantial number of billions of dollars in savings. Now, the committee had the spirit to believe that every part of the existing Farm Bill policy should save resources. So we save money in the conservation title. $6 billion. We consolidate programs. We refocus. I would say to all my friends on the floor, vote for the rule. Give us a chance to proceed to the bill so that we can consider a Farm Bill. I can assure all of you that I have given my word to the members of the Rules Committee, to members on each side of this chamber, that the committee will work hard to achieve a consensus on a nutrition bill. I don't know that what kind of a consensus that will be yet. It probably won't satisfy both of my friends on each side of the room to the extreme. But we did in good faith our work. Give us a chance to consider the merits of our reform-minded bill. Give us a chance then to address the nutrition title. Let the place work. Let the place work. I thank the chairman of the Rules Committee for yielding some time to me. I asked my colleagues to vote for this. I would tell you, if anything, part of the biggest problem with the bill 2 weeks ago was we saved money everywhere. And for some reason, no one ever wants to give anything up in this place.
Give the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman's recognized for an additional 30.
Sometimes you have to have reform. Sometimes you have to do things differently. But at least the Ag Committee chose to make the reforms across our jurisdiction, to make everybody have a stake in the savings. I know that's contrary to how the place works. But for one time, maybe, this session, or this day, or this year, or this decade, let's try it the old way. Let's try and look at the issue. Let's try to be fair and equitable to everyone. and let's do the legislative work to get ultimately to where we need to be. I thank you, gentlemen.
Gentleman's time expired. Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert on the record the letter from Taxpayers for Common Sense against this bill. I'd like to also insert on the record a letter from over 500 farm groups and conservation groups that oppose this bill.
Without objection.
And I also want to point out to my colleagues that CBO estimates that this bill, as written, will add $1.3 billion to the deficit in 2014. At this point, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this is a shameful day. The House Republican leadership has decided again to abandon all efforts to come to a bipartisan agreement on the Farm Bill. Instead, they've launched an attack on the working poor, veterans, children, and seniors who rely on the nutrition program in a desperate attempt to win political points with their conservative base. After an embarrassing, chaotic defeat of their last proposal, they've decided to make a bad situation even worse. This proposal strips out the entire nutrition title, putting families and children at risk of going hungry. They made a clear choice to protect generous subsidies for agricultural corporations at the expense of the hungry and the working poor. Make no mistake, today House Republicans are telling hungry children, food banks struggling to meet the needs of their communities, and low-income seniors who depend on food assistance that their needs don't matter. And I urge my colleagues to understand that for 180,000 Rhode Islanders who benefit from this nutrition program, they are not extraneous. This is disgraceful, it's immoral, and it's contrary to our values as a nation. I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose this shameful proposal. I yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield for unanimous consent request to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Serrano.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in strong opposition to the Farm Bill rule and the underlying bill because it takes food nutrition from working families.
Is there objection? Without it.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield for unanimous consent request to the gentleman
from Texas object. There is objection.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield for unanimous consent request to the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh.
The gentleman from Vermont is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in strong opposition to the Farm Bill rule in the underlying bill because it takes food nutrition from working families. I yield back.
Is there objection? There is objection. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Texas continues to reserve.
I reserve my time. I have no additional speakers except myself when I close.
Gentleman from Texas ready to close. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm the final speaker on our side, so I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, this is about our values. This is about what we stand for. The constant attacks by some of my Republican friends.
The House is in order. Gentleman may continue.
The constant attacks by many on the other side of the aisle, on SNAP, on poor people, on the vulnerable, is just plain wrong. Quite frankly, it's offensive. 3 weeks ago, this farm bill failed in this House because the Republicans cannot govern. You know, you are in control. 62 of your members, including 5 committee chairs, voted no. To suggest that somehow Democrats should have carried this bill is ludicrous. Because I want to make one thing clear. We are not going to vote for a bill that sticks it to poor people. And that's exactly what this bill does. The bill that you had on the floor that threw 2 million people off of SNAP was unacceptable, and we could not vote for that. There are 50 million people in this country who are hungry. 17 million of them are children. Millions of people who are on SNAP work for a living. They go to work every day, but they earn so little they still qualify for this benefit. These are our neighbors. These are our brothers. These are our sisters. Please do not turn your backs on them. Please do not turn your backs on these people. We are a better country than that. Please don't be so callous, because that's what this is about. When you throw 2 million people off of this benefit, or even more, because we have no idea what was promised to get votes on this current bill right now. We have no idea how much you're going to cut the SNAP program or whether you're going to sunset it, because none of us know what was decided at the Republican conference. But when you cut people who are poor, when you deny them the benefit of food, which should be a right in this country, that is callous. That is cruel. We should not be doing it. We should be about helping people, not hurting people. So have a heart. You know, where's your conscience? What makes this country great, what makes America great, is that we've had a tradition for caring for the least among us. That's why we're so angry over here, because all of a sudden it seems like we're turning our backs on the poor. There used to be a bipartisan consensus when it came to making sure that the hungry in this country get enough to eat. There's a long history of bipartisanship on this. All of a sudden, this has become a partisan issue. And the target, so that you can try to balance the budget, has been placed right on the programs like SNAP, nutrition programs, programs that feed our senior citizens, provide our children meals in schools. You've even gone after WIC. Enough. Enough. We can do better. We can have a bipartisan farm bill if you will move over to our side and understand that we have an obligation to take care of the most vulnerable. So vote no on this rule. Vote no on the underlying bill. We can do so much better. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair, not to other members of the body. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the gentleman from Oklahoma represents not just the conscience of my party, but also of the members of the House of Representatives. I think he well and faithfully is attempting to do his job, and it is this body today that will have an opportunity, after hearing the gentleman from Oklahoma speak about not just his desire, but his leadership on behalf of the Agriculture Committee. As he approached the Rules Committee last night, he spoke very clearly and eloquently and said it is his desire to have the Farm Bill as he calls it, to be able to be before this body today to where we can pass good and wise Farm Bill policy. He also stated before not only all the members, but also in testimony that he presented to the committee, that it is his intent to follow up today's bill, Farm Bill, with a nutrition program bill that he would bring to the Rules Committee for this House to consider. This man has worked on a bipartisan basis, and I believe should have the admiration and respect of this body, but more importantly, the gentleman placed his word of what he's trying to do before this body. I think he is a sincere and honest man. It is my intent as the chairman of the Rules Committee, as it was last night, to say to this body today, this bill, Farm Bill that is before you, does appropriate and good things for farmers and for people who make a living and provide this country with the agriculture and products it needs. We are trying to make sure that that is faithfully and well done today. I believe the gentleman from Oklahoma deserves the respect of this body, and I would ask for each and every one of us to please vote yes on this rule and the underlying legislation. I yield back my time, and I move the previous question on the bill.
The gentleman's time is yielded back without objection. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The resolution is ordered.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
As for the recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
So the House just wrapping up debate on the rule for considering the revised Farm Bill. The Farm Bill in general setting agriculture and food nutrition programs, including food stamps. This new revised bill leaves out food stamps for later debate, but would continue agriculture programs for another 5 years. It also changes dairy programs, it replaces direct payments to farmers, and it puts limits on those payments. Additionally, it repeals a law passed in 1949 setting automatic price supports. The original Farm Bill proposal failed last month. In an article written by Mary Claire Jelinek of the Associated Press, she sees the Farm Bill debate this way. Just hours before today's expected floor vote, it was still unclear whether Republican leaders had the 218 votes needed to pass the new measure containing only farm programs. The food stamp part of the legislation would be dealt with separately at a later date. The legislation faces a veto threat from the White House anyhow, and House Democrats have reacted angrily to the last-minute move by the GOP. As of late this morning, conservative groups and farm groups traditionally aligned with Republicans were also lobbying against the measure, as was the top Democrat on the House Agriculture Committee, Minnesota Congressman Colin Peterson. So again, this is a 15-minute vote. Should the rule be approved, we expect general debate to follow and then votes on final passage later on. While members vote, remarks now from House Speaker John Boehner earlier today. During his weekly legislative briefing, he discussed the House Republicans' decision to bring immigration and border security legislation to the floor in steps rather than in one bill as the Senate did. Also, the decision to bring a revised farm bill to the floor after the original bill failed before the July 4th recess.
Our economy continues to struggle with slow economic growth, high unemployment, and stagnant wages. This is the new normal under President Obama's leadership. Republicans have a plan to strengthen our economy, create new jobs, and make life work for more Americans. We've been talking about our jobs plan all year. It's here. We're going to continue to focus on jobs. Fighting to make college more affordable for students and their families. We're going to pass another bill this week to expand American energy production. And we remain committed to repealing Obamacare. Listen, Obamacare is raising costs. It's making it harder for small businesses to hire. And frankly, it's, with the last week's announcement, it's wide open to fraud and abuse. In short, it's a train wreck. And even the administration knows that this law is unworkable. The President has delayed Obamacare's employer mandate, but hasn't delayed the mandate on individuals or families. I think it's unfair and indefensible. If you're a software company making billions of dollars in profits, you're exempt from Obamacare next year. But if you're a 28-year-old struggling to pay off your student loans, you're not. If you're a big bank or a financial company, you don't have to comply with Obamacare next year. But if you're a single parent trying to make ends meet, there's no exemption for you. And if you're a big government contractor, you don't have to comply with the Obamacare mandate next year. But if you're a family of four in Ohio, you do, or you get taxed. Listen, is it fair for the President to give American businesses an exemption from the health law's mandates without giving the same break to individuals and families across the country? Hell no, it isn't. Next week, the House will vote to delay both the employer mandate and the individual mandate. I believe it's unfair to protect big businesses from Obamacare, but not individuals and families. On student loans, the Senate has now twice failed to pass a solution to this problem. Republicans have acted to protect students and their families in a bill that's very close to what the President has offered. I understand there's some tentative agreement in the Senate on an agreement. I hope it's real, and I hope that they move it soon. And finally, yesterday, our members had a good conversation about immigration reform. Our committees are going to continue their work on a step-by-step, common-sense approach to fixing the problems in our immigration system. With that, I'll take your questions.
Thank you for acknowledging us in the back row, sir.
If you'll recall, when I was chairman of the Education Workforce Committee, from time to time, instead of starting the questions with the most senior members, I would start with the most junior members, who sometimes never had a chance.
On the Farm Bill, do you expect or will you agree to bring a conference report back to the House floor, assuming this passes here, that includes a nutrition title, but that does not have the support of the majority of your
if ands and buts were candy and nuts, every day would be Christmas. You've heard that before. My goal right now is to get the Farm Bill passed. We'll get to those issues later.
What's your expectation on immigration on these smaller bills? What's your expectation of cooperation with the other side?
I don't know. But I do believe that these big comprehensive bills that tend to cause all kinds of problems. American people get suspicious. Members haven't read the bills. And that's why you've heard me talk about a step-by-step approach on a number of issues that we deal with around here. And I think when it comes to immigration reform, moving through this in a methodical, step-by-step approach allows members to read the bills, understand the bills, and frankly, allows the American people to have greater confidence that we've got our arms around what we're doing. We're doing it in a way that they can be supportive of.
Why?
Oh, sorry. Thought you were going to lose. Right ahead. Ladies first.
Well, thank you.
Ladies first. Ladies first. Remember, it doesn't cost anything to be nice.
Why should House Republicans be in favor of immigration reform that possibly includes legalization or citizenship for illegal immigrants currently here, when the argument on the Senate side and among governors is it's in their political interest, but in the House, 75%.
We have a broken. We have a broken.
House Republican districts are majority white.
We have a broken immigration system. And the legal immigration system is cumbersome, doesn't work very well. 40% of those who are here undocumented came here illegally. And there's been no real good system to be able to track those people and to enforce that part of our immigration laws. When you look at where the visas go, you've all heard all these details. The current system's broken. It needs to be fixed. You know, we get elected by the American people to come here and to do their work on behalf of them when it comes to our government. We got a broken system. It needs to be fixed, and I made a strong case yesterday that it needs to be fixed, and Republicans ought to be part of the solution.
And do you think it's in Republicans' political interest?
It's always in the party's best interest when we're doing the right thing for the country.
You've repeatedly said that you're trying to facilitate a bipartisan conversation, especially when you've not answered Jake's questions regarding support for a pathway to citizenship or a pathway to legalization. Now that you've heard from your conference, are you ready to express support for either of those?
My job is to do everything I can to facilitate a process for solving this problem. And that's what I'm going to continue to do.
But given that, why always insist on the majority within the majority? Doesn't that in itself sort of preclude the facilitation of that conversation?
No, I don't think so, no.
Taking your personal opinion aside, based on what you heard yesterday from your colleagues, do you think that there's any chance some kind of smaller bill that includes legal status or a path to citizenship can pass the House of Representatives?
Well, we're going to find out. But it's clear from the conversation yesterday that that the members do believe, that a vast majority of our members do believe that we have to wrestle with this problem. They also believe that we need to do this step-by-step common sense approach. Thirdly, I would add, it's clear that securing our borders and having the ability to enforce our immigration laws are the first big step in this process. And so I was encouraged by the comments in the meeting we had with our members yesterday. But it's going to take some bipartisan cooperation in order to move this process along.
Mr. Speaker, why did you use an emergency rule to get the Farm Bill down on the floor? And doesn't this violate what you were just saying, that members should have time to read these bills? This is a 600-page bill. It's now on the floor of the House of Representatives.
It is an unusual situation, not something I would prefer to do. But the bill that we've got on the floor is the same bill that was on the floor about 3 weeks ago, with the exception of 1 or 2 sentences. And so we're in a situation where members know what the bill is, and I don't believe it violates either the rule or the spirit of the rule. Go ahead.
On intelligence here, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not the intelligence community has been forthright on some of these programs and so on. Are there consequences when the intelligence community, and what should they be when they are not being forthright with when you guys try to do correct oversight?
Well, I have confidence in our chairman to hold their witnesses accountable. And in this case, I think Chairman Rogers and the Intelligence Committee are fully capable of holding their witnesses accountable for their testimony.
Do you believe that immigration reform in the House needs to wait for the resolution of some of these big fiscal issues that are coming up in September and the debt ceiling in perhaps October or November? And do you have a timetable or deadline in mind where this needs to realistically get done before the campaign season begins in earnest?
No. What I've been trying to do is to help the House go through a methodical process for fixing a broken immigration system. And through all the conversations that have occurred with my own members, with Democrat members, it's clear that dealing with this in bite-sized chunks that members can digest and the American people can digest is the smartest way to go. And so I'm much more concerned about doing it right than I am in meeting some deadline.
Mr. Speaker, about a year ago you were having conversations with Senator Reid about making sure there wasn't a government shutdown. You ended up with a 6-month CR. This year it seems a little bit murkier. You know, the White House has issued these veto threats against appropriations bills, but we don't know what they would do with the CR. Have you begun these conversations with Senator Reid or the White House? Are you confident that the CR will be handled discreetly and without much controversy in September?
We've not had conversations specifically about a potential CR, but I really don't see any. I don't see any big challenges. The law is the law. We agreed in the Budget Control Act from almost 2 years ago to a set of discretionary spending numbers. We also know that in the law that if the supercommittee couldn't come to an agreement, that sequestration would go into effect. And so the numbers are there, and they're going to continue to be there until there's an agreement where we have cuts and reforms that put us on a path to balance the budget over the next 10 years.
Speaker Boehner, it's well known you guys got your rear ends handed to you in the Latino community in the 2012 election. The Chamber of Commerce is in favor of the Senate bill. Marco Rubio, presumptive 2016 nominee, has put that bill as a sort of profile and courage moment. What does it say to the Latino community that the House GOP is stopping this pathway to citizenship after the Chamber of Commerce, the RNC, many other Republican groups have said it's time to get this issue behind us, it's time to modernize? Do you not risk putting the Republicans at a disadvantage with the fastest growing electoral voting group for another generation?
Well, I didn't know this was an opinion show here. Now, I'm catching my breath. We are not going to do the Senate bill. I have said this since May the 23rd. The Senate bill, in my view, is flawed. I don't believe that the triggers for border security are appropriate. And it's going to allow a process to start and continue without the border being secure. That, and I don't believe the internal enforcement mechanisms in the Senate bill are going to give the American people the confidence that we will, in fact, stop this unlimited flow of undocumented workers from coming to our country. So we are not going to do the Senate bill. I've also made clear that the House is going to do its job. And I'm doing everything I can to ensure that the House moves this process. Our committees are doing good work. And I want to continue to move this process in a step-by-step, common-sense way.
What about the GOP brand of the Latino community? What about that brand? I mean, you guys need them to win in the future. You can't win on all white folks in the presidency in the future.
This is more about doing the right thing for the country. You know, people want to get into a political conversation. I don't think it's appropriate. We've got a broken immigration system. It needs to be fixed.
House Speaker Boehner earlier today, and votes continue here in the House on the rule for the revised Farm Bill. This one splitting the bill and removing food and nutrition programs for further debate. Just one vote this time, and assuming it's approved, we do expect members to move on to general debate for an hour. Votes on passage expected at about 2 p.m. Eastern today. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi held her weekly briefing earlier today also. She talked about immigration, the Farm Bill, congressional oversight of U.S. intelligence operations, and the administration's decision to delay the employer mandate included in the health care law. By the way, we'll show you as much of this as we can until the vote is concluded.
Morning. Well, they called a vote. Seems like they time it exactly to our schedule. Let me try to be brief. As you know, members of Congress went home last week to celebrate our independence, the 4th of July, and to hear from our constituents. Bringing their concerns back. We have only to report that 190 days have passed since the start of the 113th Congress, 110 days since the Senate passed a budget. We still don't have a jobs bill, and we still don't have a budget. And this is really what the American people want us to do. The American people are waiting. The Democrats are ready to act. Democratic members of the Budget Committee have been named to a conference. Democrats have put forward our budget proposal to promote jobs and growth, to invest in innovation and infrastructure in our country, and to bring down the deficit. Growth with jobs. That's what the budget should do. Enacting a budget and replacing the devastating cuts of the sequester are necessary steps for the sake of our economy and our national defense. Yesterday, Secretary Hagel said, if the cuts are not lifted by October 1st, the size and readiness and technological superiority of our military will be reduced, placing a much greater risk, the country's ability to meet our current national security commitments. That's a pretty strong statement. It's time to engage in fair and open debate on our priorities and enact a budget that replaces the sequester, reduces the deficit, creates jobs, strengthens the middle class, and takes us into the future. It's a stunning thing that we have no jobs bill and we have no budget after the Republicans have said we are going to, we want regular order on the budget 110 days since the regular order in the Senate has moved forward. You might be interested in comprehensive immigration reform. Yesterday was a significant day in the cause of comprehensive immigration reform, so far anyway. President George W. Bush urged a positive resolution to the debate and expressed hope that we keep a benevolent spirit in mind and we understand the contributions immigrants make to our country. I've said over and over again that President Bush had been the best on immigration. He understood it intellectually. He believed in it. As a former governor of Texas, he had knowledge about why it would really be important, and unfortunately, he couldn't convince his own party of that when he was president. Yesterday also was a White House report which said that immigration
On this vote, the yeas are 223, the nays are 195. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. House will come to order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to H.R. Res. 292, I call up the bill H.R. 2642 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2642, a bill to provide for the reform and continuation of agricultural and other programs of the Department of Agriculture through fiscal year 2018 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 295, the bill is considered read. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, and the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Peterson, each will control 30 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I now yield to myself as much time as I might consume.
The gentleman's recognized. House will come to order. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 2642, the Agricultural Reform and Risk Management Act of 2013. The bill before us includes 11 of the 12 titles of H.R. 1947 as amended on the House floor last month. To recap, we adopted over 60 amendments in an open process. This bill gives taxpayers nearly $20 billion in savings in mandatory federal spending. It's the most significant reduction to farm policy in history, and further improves agricultural programs so that producers have a true safety net that is triggered only when they suffer significant losses. The bill represents or consolidates more, repeals I should say, or consolidates more than 100 programs administered by USDA, including direct payments to farmers. The bill also repeals outdated and unworkable permanent law and replaces it with the cost-effective and market-oriented provisions of the Title I going forward. This provides certainty to farmers and ranchers and eliminates the threat of government quotas and government price support levels based on 1938 and 1949 agricultural practices and economic conditions. This bill includes multiple regulatory relief provisions, making it the largest regulatory relief bill to be voted on this year. This process began 4 years ago when then Chairman Peterson led us into the countryside to have 8 field hearings across the nation. We followed up with 3 more sets of hearings, including audits of every single policy under the jurisdiction of the House Agriculture Committee. The result is the legislation that reduces the federal footprint and makes common sense reforms to policy. It's no secret, my friends, that my preference would have been to pass H.R. 1947, the full Farm Bill, last month. But that didn't happen. And we're here today with another opportunity. Today's a step towards getting a 5-year Farm Bill on the books this year. We can't lose sight of our responsibility to do this work. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, I would say this. If you're serious about reducing billions of dollars in mandatory government spending, then vote for the bill. If you're serious about reducing the size and the cost of the federal government, vote for the bill. If you're serious about providing regulatory relief to farmers and small businesses all across rural America, then vote for the bill. If you're serious about making sure every American has a safe, affordable, reliable food supply, then vote for the bill. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues in supporting this farm bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this bill, and I'm sorry that I have to do that because I started, as the chairman said, having hearings on this bill April 21st of 2010. And I do it for 2 reasons. First and foremost, I believe the strategy of splitting the Farm Bill is a mistake. It jeopardizes the chances of it ever becoming law, and I think that repealing permanent law all but ensures that we'll never write a Farm Bill again in this House. And I'm not alone in my belief that this is a flawed strategy. Last week, a broad coalition of 532 agriculture, conservation, rural development, finance, forestry, energy, crop insurance groups expressed their opposition to splitting the Farm Bill and urged House leaders to pass a 5-year Farm Bill. When such a large group of organizations, most with a different, if not conflicting, priority, can come together and agree on something, we should listen to them. Doing the exact opposite of what everyone with a stake in this bill urges us to do, in my opinion, does not make sense and is not the way to achieve success. So I don't see a clear path forward from here. There is no assurance from the Republican leadership that passing this bill will allow us to begin a conference with the Senate in a timely manner. In fact, the Republican leadership has told agriculture groups to support this bill as a way to go to conference, while also telling Republican members, fearful of the wrath of conservative groups' opposition, that there'll be no conference, or at least not without first getting concessions from the Senate, concessions that the Senate will never agree to. And there's a very real chance that we could end up in a situation like we have with the federal budget, where the House majority claim that they want something, but instead disregard regular order and demand preconditions before appointing conferees, leaving the bill hanging with nothing getting done. So maybe the chairman has received assurances from his leadership that, should this bill pass, that they're going to let this move forward to conference and appoint conferees. I have received no assurance to that end. And, you know, given the majority's past performance, frankly, I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to move in that direction. So I've repeatedly said that if they only would leave us alone, the Agriculture Committee could put together a good bill with good policy, and we did in the committee. But last month, the Republican leaders interfered by pushing into the Farm Bill poison pill amendments, amendments that the chairman and I both said it could bring the bill down. You know, and even if the House passes this bill today, I fear the leadership's continued interference will doom any prospects of getting a bill that the President can sign. The other fatal flaw with this bill is the repeal of permanent law from 1938 and 1949, and replacing it by making the commodity title in this bill permanent. If you want to ensure that Congress never considers another farm bill, and farm programs as written are going to remain forever, then vote for this bill. In every farm bill, there are some people that like things and some people that don't. The beauty of the 38 and 49 law is that it forces both groups to work together on a new farm bill, and because nobody really wants to go back to the old commodity programs, people will get to a point where they don't necessarily like it, but everybody can live with it. So if you make the new farm safety net programs a new permanent law, then what you've got permanent authorization of food stamps, you've got permanent authorization of crop insurance, and then you have permanent authorization of the Title I programs. So I'll guarantee you what that means is if you're concerned about conservation, fruits and vegetables, research, these other areas, there's never going to be a farm bill if we do this. You know, so another reason that that I'm concerned about this is the Goodlatte Amendment to the Dairy Security Act that was passed on the floor here. I lost that argument big time, but if I'm proven right and in what I said about that, and if this bill makes permanent law out of that dairy provision, I will guarantee you that this dairy provision that you're going to enact will cost more money than what you're going to save in this bill here that's being considered on the floor today. So, you know, we had a bipartisan bill out of the committee. We were able to work together. We had 13 of the 21 Democrats on the committee support that bill. We were doing fine until we got here to the floor and the leadership screwed this up. You know, and we have the votes to do this bill on a bipartisan basis if we just take out those amendments that were poison pill. I'll give you the names of the people that will vote for this bill if we do that. You can call them up yourself and ask them. You don't have to rely on me. We could do that. But no, you've got to make this a partisan bill. You know, some people on that side have been trying to make this a partisan bill for 4 months, and they finally succeeded. You know, and I don't know. I mean, I told my caucus that something I never thought would happen. You have now managed to make me a partisan. And that's a darn hard thing to do, but you accomplished it.
And this is a bad bill. It should be defeated. We should go back and do a bipartisan bill like we worked in the first place, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for a report of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, on the basis of such an eloquent statement by our ranking member, my inquiry is, at this point, could we not, in essence, table this bill and begin the process of reconstructing the bill, as the ranking member has so eloquently stated, in order to be able to feed America's children and not continue the starvation that this farm bill will create and promote for years to come?
Any requests for disposition of this bill would have to come from the majority manager.
Mr. Speaker, if I can continue my parliamentary inquiry.
Generally is recognized for a further point of parliamentary inquiry.
Is the bill not flawed, as the ranking member has said, for it has left out what has traditionally been a major component of the Farm Bill, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Program, which deals with feeding hungry Americans and hungry children?
The gentlelady has not raised a point of parliamentary inquiry. She's raised a matter that's being discussed in debate.
I'll go back and return again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker,
from Oklahoma is recognized.
I yield to the chairman of the General Farm Commodities Subcommittee from Texas, Mr. Conaway. 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption of this Farm Bill. The Farm Bill before us was fully debated by this body and subjected to more than 100 amendments just a couple of weeks ago. More than 60 of those amendments were adopted. This body has had ample opportunity to work its will, and now it's time to vote for passage. Today, those of us who came to town to cut spending, reduce the deficit, reduce the size of government, and make reforms have a real opportunity to walk the walk. This Farm Bill does all of those things. This bill is going to save taxpayers $19.3 billion. It's going to repeal or consolidate more than 100 programs at USDA, and it's going to repeal the direct program, something that many of my farmers and ranchers back home do not really want to give up. The Farm Bill also does a couple of other things. It is being considered separately on its own merits, as many in this body have called for, and it replaces antiquated permanent law so that we don't face things like the dairy cliff at the end of the year anymore. So the bill before us reforms not just the politics of the Farm Bill, but the process as well. This Farm Bill has earned our support, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished minority whip, Mr. Hoyer from Maryland.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I thank the ranking member. And I thank the chairman as well. The chairman does not want to do this, with all due respect. The chairman has said publicly he does not want to do this. The chairman has said publicly he wants to do what historically we have done, gone forth in a bipartisan way. And that's the bill he constructed last year, and his colleagues did not bring it to the floor. That's the bill he constructed this year, and it was brought to the floor. But as Mr. Peterson has so eloquently stated, it was turned from a bipartisan bill into a partisan bill. Why do we always have to do that? The response to its failure, because 62 of Mr. Lucas's party would not join him in the extraordinarily eloquent closing that he gave, not speaking to the motion to recommit, but said, look, I understand that there's some of you think this is too much and some of you think it's too little, but it is democracy. And yet, the chairman's party rejected his bill. We rejected it as well because you adopted 3 amendments that you knew beforehand was going to turn this to a more partisan bill. So what did you do? You left this House and said we're going to not compromise, not try to create a broader coalition, but we are going to narrow the coalition. We're going to try to buy off those 62 folks who said they really don't like this bill at all anyway, and get them to say, this is a Republican bill, let's pass it, knowing full well it will not pass the Senate, knowing full well that the President won't sign it. Farmers need our agreement. I've supported. May I have one additional minute, Mr. Chairman?
Yield the gentleman one additional minute.
I don't think I've ever opposed a farm bill. Not because I represent a vast farm district. I don't. But I understand that food and fiber is critical for my people, for our nation, indeed, for much of the world. And so, ladies and gentlemen, let us reject this flawed process. This process which abrogates the pledge of 3 days of consideration for legislation. Last night, published, and we're asked to vote on it today. Why? Because this is a very controversial provision, and they didn't want to have the light of day shine too long on this flawed process. Let us reject this bill. Let us reject a partisan bill. Let us speak out for the farm community of America, and yes, those who need nutritional help. And let us also speak for job growth in rural America, which the bill that the chairman reported out would have helped. This bill ought to be rejected, and we ought to do our duty and our responsibility in a responsible and effective, democratic, bipartisan, cooperative way, and I yield back the balance of my time, and I congratulate the chairman for what he would like to do.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, one of my prime subcommittee chairmen, for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the chairman for recognizing me and for the work that he's done to pull together this bill over these last 2 years. There's much that I'm hearing on this floor so far in this debate that I do not disagree with. There's much that I do agree with. The numbers are this: 62 no votes on the Republican side, 24 no vote, and 24 yes votes on the Democrat side. I've said for weeks we should go to both sides and pull together 218. I appreciate the effort to do that. I appreciate the honor that's been brought to this process by the chairman, Mr. Lucas, and others that we've worked with. We're down to this now. We're down to this is our choice. For this bill, which can provide 5 years of predictability for agriculture, and an uncertain bill that might come before us on nutrition, which I think ends up without what I want, which is reform of SNAP. I'm going to support this bill. I urge my colleagues to do the same, and I'd like to back this train up if we couldn't do it over. We can't, so I'm going to be for moving forward. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Speaker, I'm now pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Peterson. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, what we have here is not a farm bill. You tell me how in the world we can have a farm bill and separate food and nutrition out from it. The American people don't get that. When you think of farms and you think of agriculture, you mean to tell me it isn't about food? And here we have made this critical, terrible mistake of divorcing, of segregating, of separating the most basic essential of farm policy, which is to produce the food and the nutrition for the people of America. This isn't just about food stamps, although we're here because the Republican Party, my friends, and I have many over there, have been hijacked to turn a bipartisan effort to deal with the complexity, the vulgarity, where 38 states in this nation, their primary part of their economy is agriculture, it's business. My members on the Agriculture Committee, we have a broad mandate. We should be the most powerful committee up here. We not only deal with food, we not only deal with agriculture, we deal with fuel, growing our way up to energy independence. We are dealing with the heavy finance of $600 trillion in derivatives. But this makes us look small to bring a bill and call it a farm bill, and it has nothing to do with food. And it's so hypocritical, my friends. You've seen the news reports. The American people have seen the news reports where we have members who are accepting millions of dollars in subsidies
Gentleman's time
and will
expired.
be voting against poor people
Gentleman's time
who
has
need
expired.
the food to eat.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to yield to the other, Mr. Scott from Georgia, one of the chairman of the primary subcommittee on the House Agriculture Committee, 1 minute.
Thank you,
Gentleman
Mr.
from
Chairman.
Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this bill. And while